Disguised as a soldier, I dragged Xiao, the future general, from a mountain of corpses. At the victory banquet, the emperor offered him a boon: to claim the princess. Xiaoqian's sword slashed through my chest bindings, exposing me to the gasping court. This woman, he declared, voice ringing with false righteousness, deceived the throne. She stole the princess's duty to wed the foreign prince, a traitor's act, buried beneath a single good deed. My reward? A dungeon cell. Iron chains, cold and unforgiving, pierced my collarbones. Then came the princess. Her smile was poison as she crushed the bones in my fingers one by one. "Thank you," she murmured sweetly, while rats swarmed to feast on my bleeding wounds. "After all, you saved my precious Xiaolang. United us. Consider this torture my generous gift." That spring, Xiao wed the princess. His star ascending as mine snuffed out in a tungsten sheet pen at the frozen edge of the empire. Death claimed me, broken, forgotten. Then, darkness shattered. 3 words echoed, "This woman deceived." My eyes flew open. I was back on the banquet floor. The cold sting of severed bindings fresh on my skin. Xiaoqian's betrayal unfolding anew. Welcome to my channel. If you like this story, please click to subscribe. There are more wonderful stories waiting for you to listen to. Chapter 1. On the day Xiaoqian married the princess, the spring grass was green. The capital was decorated with red decorations for miles around, and the scene was magnificent. I was dressed in rags, covered in wounds, bound in chains, and leaving bloody footprints with every step. The Great Song Dynasty and the Jin Dynasty were negotiating peace, and the Jin Dynasty was returning a city in exchange for a marriage alliance with the Great Song Dynasty. His Majesty ordered me to take the princess far away to the frontier. The people, who didn't understand what was going on, pointed and gawked. Some felt sympathy, while others felt contempt. The spring chill was biting, and I had only a thin garment, shivering so much that my body had turned blue. The leader of the Jin forces who came to meet us was blind in one eye. I recognized him, Wan Yanlai, the former commander of the Whitehead Cliff. At 17, I was promoted to deputy general under General Xiaoqian. During the Battle of Whitehead Cliff, the imperial forces were ambushed, and General Xiaoqian went missing. I charged alone into the battlefield, dug Xiaoqian out of the pile of corpses, his body covered in blood, my fingers dripping with his blood. I carried him on my back through the snowy mountains all night. When the Song Dynasty reinforcements arrived, my hair was frozen with ice, and I was nearly unconscious from the cold. Back then, to save Xiaoqian, I had shot an arrow through Wan Yanlai's left eye. He wanted to devour my flesh and blood. Now, just 3 years later, I have fallen into the hands of my enemy. Wan Yanlai's lustful gaze roamed over my face. He grabbed me and pulled me into his arms, laughing hysterically. "The Deputy General Shui is actually a woman. I can't sleep with your princesses, but sleeping with you doesn't seem so bad." He took out an arrow and traced my eye socket like a cat playing with a mouse. "I heard that you were identified in the Golden Hall. Doesn't that mean that many men have seen your body? Song Dynasty women value their reputation. What should we call someone like you?" He bit my ear suggestively, his wet tongue licking my earlobe, and the 2 words were forced out between his teeth. "Whore." As soon as the words left his mouth, the golden hairpin in my hand flew toward his throat. In the blink of an eye, it was just an inch away from taking his life. But as I struck, my finger bones shattered, and I lost my aim. Wan Yanlai threw me aside with a single blow. His furious kicks landed repeatedly on my body. Blood gushed from my mouth and nose. He twisted my arm with all his strength, causing excruciating pain that made me scream. "Aren't you the best archer in the Red Plume Army? Capable of hitting a target from 100 steps away? Now you're nothing but useless trash. I'll see just how tough you really are." He ordered that I be locked in a sheep pen. Tonight. I was a sheep waiting to be slaughtered. Countless green eyes stared at me like dormant beasts, salivating at the skin exposed by my clothes. It was the middle of winter, and snow was falling heavily. I slammed my head against a stone block in the sheep pen. A crisp sound echoed, the sound of my skull shattering. Red and white blurred before my eyes. Endless hatred seared me. As I lay dying, memories flashed before me like a kaleidoscope. That year, during our escape from the snow-capped mountains, I saved Xiaoqian. It was also snowing heavily then. Xiaoqian and I huddled together for warmth in the freezing cold. I was thirsty and exhausted, on the verge of losing consciousness. He was on the brink of death, using his last ounce of strength to slit his wrist. He fed the warm blood into my mouth. Everything was as clear as day. But all of this made me think of him wrongly. Xiaoqian, you bastard. The pain of death still lingered. I opened my eyes. The palace was majestic, with golden halls and jade steps. I had returned to the day of the victory banquet. Raging anger made me clench the jade pendant in my hand. It was the one Xiaoqian had given me. My fingers dug into my palm until they bled. I had returned to the beginning of all my misfortune. At 17, I saved Xiaoqian. While I was unconscious, he discovered I was a woman. When I woke up, he was pale, feeding me medicine with his own hands. The flickering candlelight inside the tent illuminated his smiling eyes. Who would have thought that the brave Xue Xiaofu was actually a girl? He did not expose me, and we fought side by side through 3 years of blood and fire. Before returning to the capital, he promised me his life and vowed to give me the jade pendant. My cheeks flushed red, and I only thought of the golden statue's eternal vow, with no thoughts of romantic love. He smiled and pushed the jade pendant into my hand, not allowing me to refuse. But in the blink of an eye, in the golden hall, he showed his true colors. In my previous life, in the golden hall, His Majesty asked Xiaoqian what reward he wanted. He suddenly knelt down and kowtowed, asking to marry the princess. But the princess was about to leave the capital to marry a foreign prince. The crowd was in an uproar. At that moment, he drew his sword and severed my hairpin. With that sword I had caressed many times. He pierced my corset. 2 years prior, in the Song dynasty, the young daughter of a minister had eaten a piece of bread given to her by a stable hand and was subsequently starved to death by her own father. Xiaoqian's actions had undoubtedly condemned me to an inescapable fate. I wanted to resist, but the princess had drugged my wine. My long hair fell down, and my clothes could hardly cover my body. Dressed as a man, I was terrified that the secret I had kept for so many years would be exposed. Xiaoqian's sword pointed straight at my throat. Blood flowed out in large amounts, and I couldn't make a sound to defend myself. Xiaoqian knelt down. This person is a woman dressed as a man, deceiving the emperor and the people. She should be put to death. Now that she is marrying into the border region on behalf of the princess, she can be forgiven for her crime. Everyone's lewd eyes were fixed on me. Behind the screen, the women looked at me with contempt. A woman sneaking into a military camp is shameless and disgusting. An official stared at my torn clothes and chuckled maliciously. She looks rough and frail, but her skin is surprisingly smooth and fair. It's just those scars that are ugly. The scars from the bloody battle became the subject of everyone's mockery. I abandoned my silk skirt and chose armor. The dynasty I had protected with my blood and sweat was now turning its swords against me. The princess at the head of the table pulled aside the curtain, revealing her beautiful face and charming smile. After all, you are an old acquaintance of the Jin people. Compared to me, Miss Xue will surely be more pleasing to the Jin people. Xiaoqian bowed his head again. A commoner can be treated with the courtesy of a princess, which is not a disgrace to her. The sleepy emperor opened his eyes. He looked at me coldly. Then he easily decided the fate of an ant like me. I should have gone down in history. But instead I became a victim of a princess's marriage. Looking back now, all the battles and swordplay seem like a joke. My thoughts return to the present. My thoughts return to the present. At 20 years old, I sat in the hall, before the turning point of my life. My fingers dug into the bloodstains on my palms. I struggled to stay calm. Xiao, sitting beside me, noticed my stiffness and turned to ask with concern. Zhao Rong, are you feeling unwell? My hands trembled inside my sleeves as I forced a smile. I'm fine. Just a bit tired. From a distance, a pair of eyes like poisonous snakes were staring at me. Hiding my bleeding hand in my sleeve, I raised my head and looked at that beautiful face. She looked like a peony, but her heart was like a snake. I remembered that in my previous life, when I heard that the princess would soon be leaving the border, I said to Xiao, the princess is like a precious jewel. The princess is a member of the royal family. How can she be humiliated by a barbarian? I am willing to fight for her and defend the city and the princess. I also drew a small portrait of the princess and wrote a caption to comfort her. Ironically, I was the one who ended up leaving the city. I slowly turned my face away and saw the hand of the maid serving wine beside me trembling slightly. That wine was specially prepared for me, with something added to it. It was to make me easy prey for them. Taking advantage of Xiao and the princess exchanging glances, I moved my fingers slightly and quickly switched his wine cup with mine. I watched him quietly, just like in my previous life. I stood up, knelt in the hall, and bowed my head to ask for the princess's hand in marriage. I smiled coldly among the guests and clenched the long sword at my waist. This time, when Xiaoqian's sword tip parted my clothing, I drew my sword and rose. Sword flowers flew like snow, and shock flashed in his eyes. I longed to strike him down with my sword, to cut him into 1,000 pieces. The spiked wine made Xiaoqian's steps unsteady. The sword in my hand had exchanged countless blows, each strike ruthless, drawing cheers from the crowd. After a few breaths, Xiaoqian's sword was struck out of his hand and landed on the ground. The tip of my sword sliced through his throat by half an inch. Hatred nearly overwhelmed me, and I almost killed him on the spot. Blood trickled down the sword tip and onto the ground. Xiaoqian covered his throat in disbelief, blood seeping through his fingers. This time, the one who couldn't speak was no longer me. I knelt down in front of him, untied my hair, and cried out loudly. I followed in the footsteps of Mulan and joined the army in place of my father, committing the unforgivable crime of deceiving the emperor. But today, I will risk my life to denounce Xiaoqian. He is all show and no substance, greedy for glory and reckless, unfit to be the commander of the great Song army. The princess stood up in disbelief. You wretch! What nonsense are you spouting? Realizing her outburst, she forced herself to swallow the insults to avoid suspicion. I smirked challengingly. And for corrupting the harem, your crime is unforgivable. The princess was so angry that she clutched the corner of her robe so tightly that she almost broke her armor. Her eyes filled with hatred. I thought of my previous life, when I collapsed in the Golden Hall and was dragged straight to the dungeon. My meridians were destroyed. Iron chains pierced my collarbone, and the pain throughout my body was unbearable. Xiaoqian and the princess came together. The princess took out a dagger and held it up to the candlelight to examine my face. It is indeed the face of a seductive woman. She hugged Xiaoqian's neck and giggled. Xiao Lang, you've known her for 6 years. And you've never been attracted to her? Xiaoqian smiled and hugged her tightly. Never. I was only using her. That year, right away, we fought side by side. And when my red-plumed spear pierced the enemy's heart, he looked over at me with a smile. The same expression as now. At that time, he said, Shui girl is a prodigy, and it is my good fortune to have your help. Anger almost turned into blood, tears flowing from my eyes. But my throat was destroyed, and I couldn't even utter a curse. The princess laughed loudly and stabbed my finger with a dagger heated red in the candle flame, then twisted it violently. The pain made me scream, and I bit my lip until it bled. Xiaoqian took 2 steps forward, and the princess glanced at him. Feeling sorry for her? He looked away and smiled faintly. It's her good fortune to be able to make your highness happy. The princess then took a pair of tongs and smiled as she crushed my fingers. The thought of your hands touching Xiaolang makes me uncomfortable. I was drenched in cold sweat, as if I had been pulled out of the water. She clapped her hands lightly, and a jailer brought a cage. Inside were several fat old rats. The hungry rats burrowed into my clothes, and the princess ordered the guards to tie my sleeves and collar tightly, allowing them to gnaw on my flesh. I let out a blood-curdling scream like a wild beast. The princess looked at my miserable state and smiled sweetly. After all, you saved Xiaolang and brought him and me together. I am kind-hearted, and this is my reward for you. I fainted. The princess ordered someone to call the imperial physician. Keep her alive. Don't let her die. Bright red coal was scraped across my eyelids. She laughed coldly. I hear that the Golden Men are extremely fierce. Deputy General Shui, you enjoy yourself on my behalf. I will never forget those words. The emperor lowered his hand from his chin. His cold, piercing eyes locked onto me. Shui, do you know what you're saying? The potion took effect, and Xiaoqian, who was beside me, clutched his throat and collapsed to the ground, lifeless like a dead dog. I lowered my eyes and raised my voice. Your Majesty, every word I just spoke is the truth. If I hadn't been reborn, I would never have known that every victory I had achieved over the past 3 years had ultimately become Xiaoqian's achievement in the history books. Everything he had taken from me in my previous life would now be returned to me. I bowed earnestly. His provocative behavior just now was all to cover up his crimes. Xiaoqian's request to marry the princess was a major taboo in the imperial court, as it involved a secret relationship between the former emperor and a concubine. In my previous life, Xiaoqian held military power and blocked His Majesty's retreat, making me a sacrifice. Emperors are suspicious, and they cannot allow others to sleep soundly beside them. Today, I am gambling on His Majesty's suspicious nature to make him stand on my side. Everyone in the hall was stunned, and the princess's supporters pointed at me and cursed loudly. Nonsense! You're just a woman, what gives you the right to speak? I turned my face, my eyes filled with murderous intent, and stepped closer to him. What gives me the right? Because at 17, I single-handedly saved Xiaoqian at White Hare Cliff. Because at 18, I burned the enemy's supplies and forced back 2,000 Jin troops. Because at 19, I captured the Jin commander at Zhanghe Valley. Not because of your worthless head, but because of you. You fool! The man's face turned red, and he stammered, unable to speak. The hall was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Many people held their breath involuntarily. In my previous life, Xiaoqian betrayed me to claim all the glory for himself. Earlier, he provoked me first and then was defeated by me. Everyone saw it with their own eyes. This is the truth. Charge him with the crime of gross disrespect, and I'm sure the emperor will be pleased. The emperor ordered palace attendants to take me down to investigate. When I returned, the guards had already dragged the unconscious Xiaoqian away. I took a few steps forward, knelt down on the red steps, and banged my head on the ground. Your Majesty, the princess is a member of the imperial family and should not be humiliated by the Jianzhou people. I am willing to take the blame and lead the troops into battle again. I will defend the city and protect the princess. Within 3 years, I will destroy the Jianzhou people. The princess's eyes widened, as if she had heard something terrifying. Her face turned pale and her breathing quickened. I curled the corners of my lips slightly. The painting and inscription that Xiaoqian stole from me. and this sentence. All of these were turned into sweet words to weave a trap of love for the princess. Then, he used a woman's jealousy to destroy me. He would take away all my achievements. Therefore, princess, say the same words as your lover. Are you surprised? The art of ruling requires a balance of power. Xiao Qian holds military power, and you are of royal blood. If the two of you were to marry, I imagine the emperor would have been unable to sleep. Now I have forced my way into the picture. The emperor remained silent, so I crawled forward 2 steps. I will give you 3 years. I swear on my life that if I break my word, I will present my head to you. I added another bundle of firewood, determined to fan the flames. In my previous life, after I died, there was no one left in the court who could be trusted. Xiao Qian's military strategy was crude, and the princess was stubborn and self-willed. They would definitely not be able to resist the gene. Today, it was cold. The grass was withered, and the water was frozen. The great Jin's treasury was empty, and peace talks were only a temporary measure. After a few years of rest, the great song would surely launch an even more fierce counterattack. The princess's face turned pale, and she was about to say something, but was forced to retreat by a glance from His Majesty. The officials began to argue among themselves. In the face of national crisis, the court and the people rely solely on me, regardless of my gender. Zhang, the veteran statesman of 3 reigns, stepped forward and stood beside me. The old man with a white beard and gray hair had tears in his eyes. Your Majesty, the 6 states of Jibei have been occupied for nearly 30 years. The Jin have been driven out of central China. Now is the opportune moment to reclaim the lost territories. As the people eagerly await, cold sweat nearly soaked through my back. The emperor pondered for a long time, then smiled. Shui Aiqing, I hope that in 3 years, your head will still be hanging on your neck. 3 days later, I went to the prison to see Xiao Qian. He was bound to a rack, and the wound on his throat was still oozing blood. I casually brushed aside the hem of my robe and smiled at him. It's been a few days, and you look quite disheveled. His eyes glared at me as if they could devour me. I drew my dagger and pressed it against his handsome cheek. The blade left a shallow cut on his face. He let out a hoarse growl from his throat. You dare to inflict private punishment on me? I smiled gently. Not at all. Then my expression hardened, and the dagger in my hand continued to carve lines into his face. On the left, I carved the character for lowly, and on the right, the character for human. After finishing, I stepped back 2 paces and examined the blood-soaked face. I nodded in satisfaction. That's much better. In my previous life, my tendons were severed. As useless trash, I had no value to the dynasty except as a marriage pawn. But now, I am the only military commander in the court, and I am far more useful than Xiao Qian. So what if I am a woman? His Majesty uses me because of my value. I can divide Xiao Qian's military power, weaken the princess's faction, and recover the lost lands from the Jin, killing 3 birds with 1 stone. This sword of mine is utterly harmless yet highly effective. Since you are my trusted general, letting me vent a little is only fair. Xiao Qian looked utterly stunned. Zhao Rong, when did you become so ruthless? I pressed my finger against his wound and applied a little pressure. Blood flowed freely, eliciting a pained groan from him. Xiao Qian, you've called me wrong. Now you should call me General Shui. He struggled, rattling the iron chains. How could you do this to me? I retreated to my chair and sat down, propping my chin up and examining the blood-stained dagger in my hand, calmly watching him. Did the princess like the painting and inscription you stole from me? Xiao Qian's eyes lingered for a moment. Then he looked at me with pain and regret. I have my reasons. I was just playing along with the princess. Sunlight leaked into the dark prison, shining on the door and revealing tiny specks of dust. I don't know when, but there was a pair of embroidered shoes standing there. The peonies woven from shoe brocade highlighted the elegance and luxury of their owner. The princess stood there quietly. I looked over with an expressionless face. I had heard those words before in my previous life. The princess clutched the bright yellow imperial edict in her palm. I heard that she had knelt outside the imperial study for 3 days to beg for it. His Majesty has ordered that Xiaoqian be allowed to atone for his crimes by serving 3 years in exile and being demoted 3 ranks. And that he be placed under my command. I knew His Majesty would not take Xiaoqian's life so easily. So it's not too much to come and stab him in the face beforehand. Right? The princess stared at Xiaoqian's blood-stained face. And even though she was angry, a hint of pity flashed in her eyes. The maids behind her held the finest medicine for wounds. Seeing the princess's grim expression, they hesitated and didn't dare to come forward. I felt sorry for him. Men are so unlucky. I felt bored and turned away. The prey must suffer slowly before dying, to atone for the hardships I endured in my previous life. Their relationship gradually crumbled, like a flawless jade with a tiny crack. There is plenty of time ahead. I have all the time in the world to play this game. The emperor granted me a general's mansion. I had just finished arranging the mansion when the gatekeeper reported that someone was causing a commotion outside and refused to leave. My mother stood outside the gate with my older brother, peering inside the mansion with a gleam in her eyes. My hatred spread slowly into my eyes. My older brother and I were twins. Several years ago, our father died in battle, and someone had to carry on his legacy. My older brother was frail from birth, so my mother dressed me as a boy and sent me to the borderlands in his place. As we departed, the cries of parents parting from their children filled the air. My mother didn't shed a single tear, glaring at me with determination. If it weren't for you, Ada would have been a healthy child. Don't blame me for being heartless. You took his life, and now you've paid the price. During the 6 harsh years at the border, she never wrote a single letter home. When I returned victorious, she came begging me to secure a government position for my elder brother. I refused and gave them a large sum of silver. Years later, when I was being escorted to exile, covered in blood, I saw my mother supporting my elder brother among the crowd. My voice was ruined, but I endured the excruciating pain and called out, "Mother!" My brother heard me. His eyes filled with shock, pointing at me with trembling fingers. My mother turned her face away, and my brother pulled at her sleeve, urging her to look. My mother told him to shut up. We have nothing to do with him. Don't recognize him. I stopped in my tracks, only to be struck by a whip on my back, tearing open the flesh. My mother looked at me, her eyes filled with coldness. That year, the people of the capital saw me weeping on the street, as if possessed by a madman. They had no idea why I was crying. My mother's heart had always been biased, drinking my blood to warm herself and her son. Just as now, I am dressed in fine robes and a jade sash, and she scrutinizes me from head to toe, her eyes filled with calculation. My son, you are truly blessed now. I gently withdrew my hand from hers. Your brother and I are struggling financially. Why not bring us into the mansion to enjoy some comfort? Your monthly allowance has increased significantly, hasn't it? I've arranged a marriage for your elder brother, and this is the perfect time to use the money. I smiled calmly. Mother, I truly have no silver. The silver was indeed non-existent, though the emperor had bestowed me with several valuable items. Her expression immediately hardened, her greedy eyes gleaming with malice. You have no silver? Are you trying to deceive me? She reached out and pinched my brother's waist, and he immediately joined in, threatening me. If you don't give me the silver, I'll go to the palace and accuse you of impersonating me to join the army. We'll all die together. The golden hall was a place of great danger. Yet they didn't utter a single word of concern. My mother glared at me with hatred, her sharp nails digging into my flesh. If it weren't for Ada giving you this opportunity, how could you have made something of yourself? Now you're asking for silver as if it were your life. You shouldn't have been born. You good for nothing. I remained calm, my tone light. I didn't say I wouldn't give it to you. Don't worry. I motioned for them to lean closer and whispered a few words. The two of them looked delighted and believed me. I took out a jade pendant of excellent quality and told them to pawn it. I said it was worth 300 taels of gold. My mother smiled broadly, but still had a hint of suspicion, warning me, "If you dare to deceive me, I'll skin you alive when I get back." The gate closed slowly, and they rushed out onto the street. They headed toward the pawnshop as specified. They didn't look back once. I slowly closed my eyes and felt moisture slide down my cheeks. Mother and brother, go slowly. Go to your deserved punishment. The pawn shop where my mother and brother went was actually the princess's private property. The jade pendant I gave them was the one Xiaoqian had given me before returning to the capital. Xiaoqian and the princess were already slightly estranged at that time. He needed an opportunity to make the princess believe in his love. People like them are always like that, using innocent people as stepping stones. Then I would give him that opportunity with my own hands. I heard that on that day. The princess and Xiaoqian stood together and watched as my brother's legs were broken. My mother was heartbroken and cried and cursed. The princess thought she was too noisy, so Xiaoqian sent someone to cut out her tongue. When I found my mother and brother in the mass grave, they were still alive. My mother trembled as she reached out and grabbed the corner of my robe, leaving a bloody handprint. Her severed tongue could not make a sound. But I looked closely at her lips and read the words she was trying to say. I should have strangled you to death back then. Even as a ghost. I won't spare you. I knelt down and slowly pulled the hem of my robe from her palm. Don't worry, Mother. I will save you both. Because death is the only liberation for you. They climbed over my bones and blood to survive. Such relatives I would rather not have. But I insisted they live. Even if it means endless suffering and torment in the future. I spread the news overnight. After all, my mother and brother were crippled. So this had to be reported. His Majesty was counting on me to risk my life for him. So he would give me this favor. The next day, the censors jointly submitted a report, accusing the princess and Xiaoqian of treating human life as grass. His Majesty was furious and punished the princess with 3 months of house arrest. Xiaoqian was beaten with 10 strokes of the court cane. When I left the city with the tiger token, Xiaoqian insisted on accompanying me on military duty. He looked like a lamb led to slaughter, being carried along behind. The people murmured among themselves. They say this general is a woman. She's pretty and has a heroic spirit. She's quite something. A bystander picking his teeth sneered disdainfully. A woman entering the military camp? This is chaos. Some spoke with hidden meanings. A woman, I wonder what she did to earn those military merits. A rotten egg was thrown at the person. An old woman selling vegetables crossed her arms and shouted angrily. A real man would join the army instead of spreading rumors here. Let me tear your mouth apart today. The pig butcher slammed his knife down on the cutting board. General Shui fought so many battles for us. And if you say another word, I'll cut out your tongues. The group attacked the men, who fled in disarray, covering themselves with vegetable leaves. The blood-stained words carved into Xiaoqian's face were almost completely healed thanks to the medicine brought by the princess. But terrifying scars remained. Now he was the one being pointed at and mocked. His dignity completely shattered. It was him. In recent days, some in the army had been dissatisfied with me. I made an example of them, beating down a few troublemakers one by one. No one dares to question me anymore. In my previous life, Wan Yanlai said I could hit a target from 100 steps away, and my red-plumed spear was the best in the army. He wasn't lying. Back then, Xiao Qian also asked me, "Why are you, a girl, mingling in the military camp?" It seemed like everyone thought women should stay home. And be gentle and quiet, marrying a man with a bright future. In my previous life, countless faces had commented on my appearance. Today, I am the commander-in-chief of the Song dynasty, leading 3,000 soldiers under my command. No one in the court dares to speak ill of my appearance as they did in my previous life. Because I will not become their wife. I will become their colleague, or even their superior. On the night I infiltrated Yingzhou, a mutiny broke out in the camp. Xiao Qian's former loyal followers plotted to seize me, take the tiger token, and install Xiao Qian as the new leader. The few who were captured were personally bound by me and beheaded on a high platform. I held the severed heads high, my face splattered with blood. Those who disobey military orders shall be executed. This action further elevated my prestige within the army. However, the soldiers sent to pursue them returned empty-handed, allowing Xiao Qian to escape. The following night, as the frost grew heavy, I had just extinguished the candle. In the distance, the sound of galloping horses and clashing swords echoed. Someone shouted, "Trouble! The Jin forces are attacking at night." The sounds of slaughter grew closer. I drew my sword and stepped out. Surrounded by smoke and the stench of blood, the Jin soldiers moved as if they were in an empty field, familiar with my formations. My boots were stained with blood, and I narrowly dodged an arrow, coming face to face with the Jin commander. It was none other than Wan Yanlai, the man I had blinded in one eye. Seeing that I had dodged, he regrettably clicked his tongue and handed the arrow to Xiao Qian beside him. "Ha ha ha. Come on. Let's see who will emerge victorious." Xiao Qian drew his bow and nocked an arrow, but did not aim it at me. He simply stared at me. "Zhao Rong, you only brought 5,000 troops. Tonight, we have 10,000 troops. You cannot win." I shouted back coldly. "Did you give the defense map to the Jin people?" "Xiao Qian, are you even human?" Wan Yanlai laughed maliciously. "Who put your emperor in such a predicament? Being ridden like a horse by a mere woman? Surrender immediately and beg him to spare you as a concubine." Xiao Qian slowly opened his eyes, hiding his gloomy gaze. "Surrender. Zhao Rong, I can forgive you for everything you did to me before. That year at Whitehead Cliff, I slit my wrist and fed you my blood. Everything I did was sincere. If you surrender, we can be together forever." At this point, he still thinks I have some feelings for him. I threw my long sword to the ground and peered into the distance. "Ah, what a pity." Xiao Qian closed his eyes. "Yes. What a pity. Even though you nearly took my life a few days ago, you are destined to fall today." I tilted my head and smiled. "Sorry. When I said it's a pity, I meant today is your doomsday." Golden spears and iron horses surged forward like a tidal wave, with shouts of battle echoing everywhere. Reinforcements appeared like divine soldiers, sweeping across the battlefield with thousands of troops. The Jin soldiers who had previously held the advantage were instantly slaughtered into a disorganized mess. I drew my bow and aimed at the defenseless Wan Yanlai, firing an arrow. The arrow pierced straight through his throat, knocking him off his horse. Blood gushed from Wan Yanlai's throat. As he took his last breath, I sneered with contempt. "Your archery skills are far inferior to mine." Xiao Qian's face turned pale in disbelief. I leaped onto my horse and charged toward him. "Do you think I was completely unprepared for you? The main Jin forces have been redeployed, and the defenses in Yingzhou have weakened. This is the perfect opportunity to strike while the iron is hot. How dare you assume I have 5,000 troops? You fool! There are only 1,000 soldiers in the camp tonight." Xiao Qian retreated steadily under my attacks. Hatred filled my eyes with blood. Something rustled in the wind and snow, staining the thin layer of snow on the ground a pale red. When the snow stopped, my sword was pressed against Xiao Qian's neck. He was covered in wounds, with 7 sword strikes in his body. 4 of them severed his tendons in his hands and feet. Not one more. Not one less, exactly the 4 sword strikes he had inflicted on me in my previous life. Xiao Qian's blood soaked through his front, and he murmured faintly. It was a diversionary tactic. I have lost to you after all. Tonight. I left only 1,000 troops behind. The remaining 4,000 will launch a surprise attack on Yingzhou, then join forces with the reinforcements to encircle Wanyanlai completely. Tears streamed endlessly from Xiao Qian's eyes. I was born into a lowly family. My elder brother beat me daily and forced me to fight wild dogs for food. I joined the army, but the aristocratic youths treated me like a dog. At that time, I swore that one day I would rise above them all and trample those who mocked me, humiliated me, and looked down on me under my feet. After I became a general, I wanted to bring my mother out, but she died. At this point, he laughed madly. She was a concubine who was falsely accused by my mother of having an affair with someone and drowned in a pond. My mother was of noble birth, and I couldn't do anything to her until the princess found me and used her power to help me take revenge. At that moment, I realized how tempting power and influence are. I will climb to the top by any means necessary, even if it means betraying everyone who loves me. I remained silent as I pushed the sword forward. Blood trickled down his neck. What does any of this have to do with me? Xiao Qian raised his neck and stared at me blankly. That year on the snowy mountain, you rushed thousands of miles to save me. You don't know how ecstatic I was when I discovered you were a woman. You also don't know that the jade pendant was the only thing my mother left me. I never loved the princess, but I had no choice in the matter. I know you hate your mother and brother and wanted to use my hands to eliminate them. So I did it. Zhao Rong. I don't have your luck. After losing so many battles, I started to doubt myself. I needed another shortcut to rise above, and I had no choice. In the next instant, I stabbed him through the chest with my sword. He let out a pained groan and choked back the rest of his words. I scowled in disgust. Enough. Every word you say is disgusting. At this point, do you still think you lost the battle because of bad luck? Let me tell you, while you were drinking away your sorrows, I was staying up all night studying military tactics. While you were sleeping soundly, I rose at dawn to practice my martial arts. While you were trapped in the enemy camp because of your arrogance, I was discussing how to rescue you all night long. Your failure was entirely your own doing. He closed his eyes calmly, a smile curling the corners of his mouth. Well, dying by your hand isn't so bad. I sheathed my sword and clamped my hand tightly around his jaw. Die by my hand? I hate you so much, how could I let you have your way? He was stuffed into a sack, his hands and feet bound. Desperate screams echoed in my ears as he begged me to end his suffering. I coldly waved my hand. This is your fate, you must accept it. He was then thrown to his doom. Wanyanlai trusted Xiao Qian, leading to the annihilation of 10,000 Jin troops. The Jin people hated him even more than I did. The Song dynasty did not need such a traitor, but the Jin dynasty did. The next day, a mutilated corpse was hung from the gates of Yuzhou City. The Jin dynasty's peace talks were nothing but a delaying tactic. In my previous life, I died a miserable death in a sheep pen. In a few days, my bones will likely be treated the same way by the Jin. Xiao Qian, what you owe me is finally paid in full. When I led the Song dynasty's iron cavalry to breach the city gates, I looked up and saw that head. On that face were the words I had carved with my own hands. The blood-soaked head had a pair of blood-red eyes staring in terror. They looked like they couldn't close their eyes even in death. Very well, Xiao Qian. Then keep your eyes open. Watch me take Yuzhou. Watch me restore the old kingdom. There is only one person left for me to avenge. And you, princess. Confining the princess for 3 months before I left was the first step of my plan. 3 months later, when she comes out, she will find that the world has changed. I led the army to capture Yingzhou and break through the gates of Yuzhou during her confinement. During her confinement, I will lead my army to capture Yingzhou and attack Yuzhou, all to rescue one person. The prince who was sent to the Great Jin as a hostage 7 years ago. The princess's half-brother, Li Huayu. I don't know how he managed to survive in the hands of the Jin with the relations between the two dynasties so tense. Perhaps that is another story of miracles. In my previous life, when I was sent to the frontier in ragged clothes during the harsh winter, I once passed by a nobleman in a carriage. A servant approached with a large cloak. My master sees this woman is pitiful, please show mercy. The jailer allowed me to wear the cloak to cover my disheveled appearance. In my life of betrayal and abandonment, the final destination of my journey was graced by a stranger who gave me a cloak to maintain my dignity. The cloak was embroidered with golden clouds, and inside was stitched a name, Li Huayu. 7 years ago, the Jin dynasty requested a marriage alliance with the Song dynasty. His Majesty loved his legitimate princess and refused on the grounds that she was still young. Instead, he sent a son who was even younger than the princess to the Jin dynasty as a hostage. When I left the border in my previous life, it was the day he returned to the capital. Li Huayu's biological mother was not favored and died under mysterious circumstances when he was young. Such a powerless person had managed to stay safe in the Jin dynasty for 7 years. His Majesty seemed to have forgotten about him, leaving him to fend for himself in an enemy country. I think the emperor dotes on the empress, who has only given birth to one princess in many years. I want revenge, and Li Huayu is the key to breaking the deadlock. After capturing Yuzhou, I saw Li Huayu for the first time. He was thin, with calm and indifferent eyes that seemed to hide a wealth of wisdom. To my surprise, he did not immediately set off for the capital. Instead, he reported to the emperor and fought alongside me on the front lines. The emperor had few children, and among them, only the princess and Li Huayu were slightly older. He decided to give him this opportunity to gain experience. On the day the princess was to be released from confinement, the streets were filled with news of my victory in Yingzhou and Yuzhou. The people of the capital cheered and ran to tell each other the good news. It was amid this festive atmosphere that she learned of Xiaoqian's death. She immediately spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted. When she woke up, she frantically broke free from her guards, drew her sword, and tried to kill the people passing by. What are you celebrating? My Xiaoling is dead. Yet you rejoice here. Why? Why? You lowly peasants. I will kill you all. The crowd scattered in panic. Though the emperor intended to suppress the incident for his beloved daughter, many had witnessed her state that day. Word spread throughout the capital, and the princess's image was ruined. She was gradually losing the most important thing for those in power, the hearts of the people. And this was something that only the scum she despised could give her. Even from thousands of miles away, I could feel the princess's power beginning to wane. The 3-year deadline was approaching, and I had captured 5 of the 6 provinces of Jibei. The Jin people were gradually being driven back to the northern border. My achievements overshadowed those of my lord, and his majesty could no longer sit still. The princess was even more anxious than his majesty. Between her and me stood the hatred of our past lives and the life of Xiaoqian in this life. Especially since Li Huayu, who was a threat to her, was still with me. Another spring had come. His Majesty was suffering from a long illness and was unable to handle state affairs. He personally conferred the title of Princess of the State on the princess and appointed her to handle political affairs on his behalf. The princess sent 12 golden tablets summoning me back. I knew that if I returned to the capital, I would never come back. A cup of poison in prison, a piece of white silk in the palace, or perhaps an ambush on the road back to the capital. Any of these could easily kill me. Li Huayu came to find me. As a woman, your circumstances are always more difficult. Even if you are both literate and martial, and have achieved countless merits, in their eyes you are still just a woman, destined to remain beneath them. The world itself is unfair. Since there is unfairness, we must fight with all our might. At this point, do you really want to accept your fate? I smiled and handed him the freshly brewed tea. Your Highness, those are exactly my thoughts. I am willing to fight alongside you. Even if we lose, I will have no regrets. The next day, the court and the country were shocked. Li Huayu issued a proclamation detailing the princess's crimes, accusing her of secretly putting cinnabar in the emperor's food, causing him to fall ill. He and I would lead a large army back to the capital to save the emperor. The princess was furious and threw the proclamation on the ground. She sent troops north to fight, and the Jin dynasty was also trying to fight back. Our situation was very dangerous. If we weren't careful, we would be attacked from both sides and our entire army would be wiped out. Unfortunately, the generals she sent were nothing but drunkards and good-for-nothings, completely incapable of fighting. Years of warfare had made my experienced troops even more elite. The princess's harsh rule after she came to power also made the people's lives miserable. She was greedy for pleasure and used the people's tax money to renovate the palace, leaving the army short of food and supplies. Under her foolish rule, our army grew stronger and stronger. In less than half a year, Li Huayu and I were about to lay siege to the city. The princess was desperate and sent troops from the capital to block the city gates with the people in an attempt to prevent the attack. She also placed many archers on the city walls, vowing to defend the city to the death. I gradually lost the upper hand. As the two sides were locked in a stalemate, a faint voice emerged from the crowd. The third prince and General Shui drove away the Jin people for us. They shouldn't have ended up like this. More and more voices emerged. The princess's tyranny is like a tiger. How can such a person be the ruler of the world? Even if we die here today, we must let them into the city. Some began shouting to open the gates, pushing forward, followed by a second, then a third. Some of the imperial guards dropped their swords and joined the crowd. The leading officer shouted loudly, "Anyone who dares to approach will be executed on the spot." In the next instant, he was cut down from his horse by a soldier behind him. Almost everyone dropped their weapons, their shouts shaking the heavens. "Open the city gates! Let General Shui in!" On the high platform, the princess pulled out her command flag and roared, "Scum! Kill these scum!" I drew my bow and shot an arrow through her wrist, which was holding the command flag. She let out a scream and was carried away by the crowd. The city gates were wide open, and I drove straight in. Li Huayu went around to the north gate and surrounded the capital with his troops. Now the imperial palace was like a piece of cake for us. It was like catching turtles in a jar, and the princess and the emperor were the two turtles. The princess stole a palace maid's clothes and prepared to escape, but she was caught with her hair all messy and brought before me. When she saw me, she still screamed frantically, "I am the princess appointed by His Majesty himself. You traitor! How dare you kill me?" Her voice was shrill and piercing. It annoyed me to no end. So I had someone stuff her mouth with horse manure. Then I grabbed her hair and dragged her step by step to the hall where the emperor was resting. Li Huayu stood quietly in front of the bed in full military uniform. On the bed lay his father, the emperor. After so many years, the emperor had aged greatly. He turned his face toward us three, and upon seeing the princess's pitiful state, a look of pity flashed across his face. "Huayu, I can pass the throne to you." Amidst the princess's frantic screams, the emperor coughed a few times, coughing up blood. "But I have two conditions. The first is that you must treat your elder sister well. As for the second, The emperor's gloomy gaze turned to my face, filled with hatred and resentment. He sat up with difficulty and pointed at me. This woman must not be spared. She will disrupt the court and bring disaster upon the kingdom. Li Huayu remained silent, as if weighing his words. The princess's desperate eyes revealed her ecstasy. But Li Huayu smiled. A clear, crisp smile. He stretched out a finger, easily pushed the emperor back onto the bed, and said softly, "Father, what makes you think I would agree to these two conditions?" He took off the jade hairpin on his head, and his long hair fell like a waterfall. "My dear father, you are truly pitiful. At this point, you don't even know whether I'm a man or a woman." The emperor stared in shock. His throat filled with phlegm, causing him to cough hoarsely. For a moment, he couldn't utter a word. Li Huayu smiled. "You favored the empress. But she was jealous. My mother feared I would bring trouble. So she declared me a male at birth and raised me as a man from childhood. Thanks to your indifference, I was able to keep this secret until today." The princess covered her head in despair and screamed that it was impossible. I brought the princess to the bedside. Li Huayu held the jade hairpin in front of her. "Do you remember this hairpin?" The princess's eyes widened in fear and she shook her head repeatedly. She pressed the tip of the hairpin against the princess's face. "This hairpin was used by you and your mother to frame my mother. You claimed you saw her steal it with your own eyes. And the empress had her tortured. When I found her, her hands had been broken, and she was drowned in a well. Her body was already decomposing." Li Huayu pressed down hard, and the hairpin pierced the princess's mouth. It stabbed into her repulsive tongue. She turned her head and smiled at the emperor. "Don't worry. I will send your beloved daughter to join you." The emperor gasped. "Wicked monster." He used all his strength to utter these words. Then he coughed up a mouthful of blood. His eyes rolled back. And he died. Li Huayu handed me his sword and looked at the princess screaming on the ground. "Zhaorong. As we agreed, she is yours to dispose of." I walked out of the hall with unsteady steps, the sunlight shining on me. The front of my clothes was splattered with blood. It was from when I cut the princess's throat just now. The emperor had few children, with only 2 daughters and 1 son left. All of them children. Li Huayu had not yet ascended the throne, and he personally appointed me as the Grand General of the state. Some people could no longer contain themselves. The next day, dozens of court officials came forward to speak. They said that rumors were spreading throughout the capital that I had disguised myself as a man, seduced the new emperor, and disrupted the imperial court. I should be expelled from the court. Li Huayu, dressed in his imperial robes, sat above, pondered for a moment, then smiled and asked me, "You've been given the title of General of the Imperial Guard, which can't be bestowed on anyone else. Say something." I split the table with a sword. "What nonsense! Who spread this?" Li Huayu frowned. "I shall be the first female emperor of this dynasty. If such absurd words reach my ears again, you shall pay with your heads." Since the new emperor had already made such a declaration, no one dared to discuss my cross-dressing anymore. After the empress ascended the throne, she issued new policies. Women could now establish households, own property, and engage in commerce. They could also attend schools to read and write alongside men. Later, the first female top scholar of the dynasty was even born. The empress established an embroidery workshop in Jiangnan. She gathered many homeless women and taught them to weave and trade silk. When the empress and I traveled incognito to the south, we passed by a farmhouse. A couple was holding a newborn baby girl. An old woman passing by couldn't help but comment, "Ah, a new daughter has been born. She'll probably have a hard life." The wife smiled and pointed toward the capital. "Our new emperor is a woman. The General Shui who recaptured the 6 states of Jibei is also a woman." The husband smiled in agreement. Life will be better from now on. The Empress and I exchanged a smile. As we continued on our way, I lifted the curtain. It was the spring of the 8th year of the Changxi era. The spring scenery outside was beautiful, and all the gloomy memories of the past had faded away. I finally saw it. The sky was bright, and the dark river flowed endlessly. The end.